Hello and welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Jeanine Scheffert. I am the Senior Manager of Philanthropy Events here at Food and Water Watch and your host for Livable Future Live, our monthly virtual education series. For any of you new to Food and Water Watch, welcome. We are a national organization fighting for safe food, clean water, and a livable climate for all. We use grassroots activism at the local, state, and federal levels of government to protect people's health, communities, and democracy from the growing destructive power of some of the world's most powerful economic interests. Today, we will be talking about food and legal justice, how we're defending our food in the water and courts. Before we get started, though, I want to take a moment to say something that is top of my mind. This past Saturday, I was hiking in the woods in Minnesota when my hiking buddy received an urgent call from a family member. He said a Democratic lawmaker had been assassinated and others had been shot. He urged us not to open the door for any police because the suspect was dressed as though he were an officer. The call prompted us to reflect aloud about the time we're living in. How do we stay safe? What can we do to make it better? How can we protect these trees and this water we're walking alongside, and our family and our friends and our neighbors at a time when so many people are not safe answering that door for fear of someone with a mask or a gun waiting on the other side? We see Trump weaponizing ICE and then deploying the National Guard and Marines in Los Angeles in an attempt to intimidate those protesting against this weaponization. Just yesterday, we saw a video of the New York controller and mayoral candidate detained for asking to see a warrant while visiting an immigration court and accompanying a person out of the room. I've been reflecting a lot lately on a question many of us were asked in elementary and high school classes. What would you have done if fascism or authoritarianism was knocking at the door? It's a question I know a lot of people are asking themselves right now. And one of the important things many of us are doing is showing up for mass protests, like the No Kings event that happened later that Saturday. In my little town of 8,000 people, 1,000 of them gathered peacefully in a park and marched down the street with signs of protest. I'm going to share photos now from the No Kings event that many of my colleagues and allies hosted and attended across the country. Nationally, it has been reported that over 5 million people showed up to these rallies, including, I'm sure, many of you, taking to the streets to protest the current Trump administration and its authoritarian actions, including his complete lack of consideration for our communities, for our planet, and for the law itself. Which brings me to another thing I can do, which is to be right here with you right now. I'm proud to be working with Food and Water Watch, and I'm proud to be connecting with all of you today. Today, we're shining a light on the important legal work that Food and Water Watch and our allies do to fight for what we know is right. So thank you for choosing to be here too. I know I say this every month, but I'm so grateful to be in community with you and to be working alongside all of you. Thank you for continuing to be an important part of this community and this movement, standing up for our food, water, communities, and our planet. Today, we'll be talking to Food and Water Watch Legal Director Tarah Heinzen and allies Jen Duggan of the Environmental Integrity Project and Phoebe Seaton of Leadership Counsel for Justice and Accountability. A few quick notes about Zoom before we get started.
Real quick, Jeanine, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I think our chat is disabled for everybody to join in on. Are you able to open that up so we can get some fun things going in the chat?
Yes, thank you for letting me know that.
Welcome.
Let's see. It looks open, but let me try. Sorry, here we go. There, is that working now? Great, okay, thanks for letting me know. Apologies for that. Okay, so yes, please use this chat box throughout the evening to share your thoughts and your reactions to what you're hearing. The chat is also where we will share information and links so keep an eye out for those. You'll also see a Q&A box. If you have questions for any of our speakers today, please put those in the Q&A box so we are sure to see them. I will work in as many of your questions as I can. And finally, I am recording this event, and I will share the recording with you in an email I will send out later this week. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are coming together in community today with a diverse set of backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences, but with a common belief in the importance of fighting for clean water, sustainable food system, and a livable future for all. As you share your thoughts and questions in the comments, please make sure to keep them respectful. We do have someone monitoring the chat, and we'll ask anyone not abiding by this request to leave the event. I'm excited to announce our next Livable Future Live, which will take place in August. On Wednesday, August 20th, we will be talking about the fight against pesticide companies like Bayer, the maker of Roundup, and their attempt to gain legal immunity for the health harms they've been accused of. We'll put a sign-up link for that event in the chat, and I hope you will join us. As we all know, we have a big fight ahead of us, but Food and Water Watch has a 20-year history of winning, and we are prepared to defend the strides we've made. We will continue to take on factory farms, protect our water from toxic chemicals, and stand up against corporate greed. And it's with the power of the people, all of us, coming together and joining forces to get this work done. There are many ways for you to get involved with our work, including joining our volunteer network, attending our events, and making a donation. Thank you so much for your generosity and for being a part of this community and this movement of people defending our food, water, and future. We don't take any corporate funding, so we are not beholden to any special interests other than the health of our communities and our planet. Our support comes from people like you. Your support now strengthens us for the many fights ahead. So thank you so much for your generosity. And with that, let me further introduce today's topic. Food and Water Watch's legal team, Food and Water Justice, is working in the courts to defend protections for safe food, clean water, and a livable climate as the Trump administration takes aim at bedrock environmental law and the rule of law itself. We're here today to hear from Food and Water Watch's legal director, Tarah Heinzen, and our allies, Jen Duggan, executive director of the Environmental Integrity Project, and Phoebe Seaton, co-director and attorney for Leadership Counsel for Justice and Accountability. Together, we're challenging the illegal regulatory rollbacks and industry attacks on protections for clean water, family farms, and the climate. Tarah, Phoebe, and Jen, thank you so much for being here today. Tarah, can you start us off by giving a brief introduction of your work and your approach to the current political situation, including the ways in which we are working with Phoebe and Jen?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Jeanine, and thanks to Jen and Phoebe for taking the time to join us today for this discussion. I'm Tarah, as Jeanine said. I've been with Food and Water Watch for nearly 10 years, and I've been in our legal director role for nearly 5. And in that role, I oversee our team of attorneys and all of our legal work, all of which is aimed at advancing our priority campaigns to get off fossil fuels, stop factory farms, and protect clean water. And as hard as this moment is, I think Food and Water Watch is really well positioned to meet this moment. I came to Food and Water Watch because we take bold, uncompromising positions on critical issues, and we use every tool in the advocacy toolbox to lead and win strategic campaigns. And using litigation in a membership-based organization like ours, focused on building power through grassroots organizing, presents unique opportunities for us in the courts. Our team of just 5 attorneys and 1 paralegal are engaged in more than 20 lawsuits and numerous other legal strategies at any given time, in addition to providing hands-on legal support to our organizers and campaigns across the country. So we're doing everything from developing legislative analysis and talking points for our organizing colleagues to leading high-impact national litigation in federal court against the Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies. And what's great about our work is we're able to be just as bold in the courts as we are in our grassroots advocacy, and to use litigation creatively to not just win in court, but to engage our membership and build relationships and people power, and advance our narrative and shed light on the real world impacts of this administration's attacks on public health and the environment. So I think this is more critical than ever in this political moment when we know that the two main lines of defense that we have against this authoritarian and unlawful administration are the courts and also the people. Leadership Counsel for Justice and Accountability and the Environmental Integrity Project are really important partners in our legal work. We've been working with Leadership Counsel for several years to reform California's low carbon fuel standard program, which is fueling the expansion of factory farms by incentivizing factory farm biogas digesters, harming frontline communities, not just in California, but all over the country. And we've worked with EIP on many matters over the years, including cases they're leading to challenge EPA's inadequate water pollution standards for slaughterhouses and several other major industries, including a case that they just won for us and other groups today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Phoebe.
So Phoebe, you're the co-director and attorney for Leadership Counsel for Justice and Accountability. Can you tell us about your organization, your work, and your approach to the current political situation?
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for your time, and thanks for the question. I'm Phoebe Seaton with Leadership Counsel. We are based in the California San Joaquin and Coachella valleys that do two of the major agricultural regions in the state. As other panelists know, and I'll share with you all, this morning is a little bit distracting with the intro couldn't have been better, unfortunately, that many of the community partners we work with work in farm work throughout, and we're seeing major raids, especially in the Coachella Valley today. And so I actually think that I would have answered this question differently a week ago than I'm answering it today. And one of the similar to Food and Water Watch, we're a multi-issue organization. We also use many tools. We work at the kind of intersections of agriculture, land use, drinking water and groundwater, transportation, housing, and energy, which sounds like a laundry list, but I think all of those things kind of interplay in one of the examples that Tarah, you just lifted, of the issue of manure biogas. And now we're seeing other issues like immigration play in our work in ways that we have not seen probably, I will say actually ever, but certainly not in the four or 5 years. Some of the ways that we're just working in this moment at this time is focusing a lot of our work at the statewide level, which is we are very fortunate to be in California, where in some ways we're insulated from the kind of federal structure and federal changes, and talk more about this in a bit. We also are doing more work kind of at the intersection of immigration, which is something that we don't generally work on, but we have diverted some of our resources to make sure that we're supporting the organizations that do, and making sure we're getting resources to people that need resources, information, et cetera. We're also in a position that is well-trained from the COVID era, where we're transitioning a lot of our intensive organizing work to hybrid opportunities, making sure that people can join and engage as much as possible from the safety of their homes, if they feel more safe in their homes. So it is, impacting already our ability to organize and show up. There are a lot of local and even state agencies where people no longer feel safe to engage because everybody, even the friendliest governments, have made it clear we can't protect you at this time if from federal action. The on maybe the brighter side, I think we're taking kind of the radical step of not changing in a lot of ways. Some of our we'll talk a little bit more of our engagement with the feds. We have lost some of our funding for our commitment to taking on the hardest issues, being committed to environmental justice and racial equity. And so some people have offered to update our website to sanitize it a bit, and we have decided to move in the opposite direction. And kind of, as I think mentioned, we're doing our best to work, in partnership with community leaders, organizational partners that we've worked with for the past 10 to 15 years to navigate a very quickly changing environment, quickly changing circumstances, making sure that we're providing the basically the services that are needed at the moment, but not losing sight of the long-term goal of ensuring that everybody has access to a safe and clean and healthy environment. Nothing changed in the past year that made it more okay for people to have unsafe drinking water, that made it more okay for people to put on the back burner having the highest asthma rates in the country. And so we are, doing our best to meet the emergencies and meet the long-term goals as best as we can.
Yeah, thank you so much, Phoebe. Let's see, let's get Jen up here. Jen, you are the Executive Director of the Environmental Integrity Project. What kind of work do you do, and what approach are you taking with the current political climate?
Thanks, Jeanine, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to chat with everyone today. EIP's mission is to protect public health and our natural resources by holding polluters and government agencies accountable under the law, advocating for tough but fair environmental standards, and empowering communities that are fighting for clean air and clean water. We are a team of lawyers, engineers, research analysts, former journalists, and community organizers. So we are quite the diverse crew, and we take a multidisciplinary approach to reducing air and water pollution from industrial pollution sources. So we have a focus and expertise on those industries that have a large climate, water, and air pollution footprint, like oil, gas, and petrochemical operations, coal plants, waste management, including landfills and incinerators, and other manufacturing sectors like steel and aluminum. We're based in DC, but we have our staff are across the United States, and we have very strong and local partnerships in the areas where we work, where these facilities are located, in the Gulf South, in the Midwest, the Ohio River Valley, and Western Pennsylvania, and the Mid-Atlantic. I think that we are really seeing an unprecedented assault on public health and environmental protections right now. It is really shocking in terms of the speed, the scope, and the complete disregard for the rule of law. EPA is not enforcing the environmental laws on its books. They are rolling back regulations at a speed and scale we just haven't seen before. They are indiscriminately firing EPA staff, slashing EPA's budget, and shutting down offices that are intended to protect the most vulnerable communities across the United States. We are, in many ways, the strategies that we are using in this moment in time are the same strategies, which is legal in the courts. It is giving the communities that we work with the legal and technical resources they need to fight back and claim their rights under our environmental laws. And we are spotlighting the illegal activity. We are spotlighting data and making sure that the public understands what's at stake with what's happening in terms of the attack on environmental health, really. So part of that work means that we are working, on the defense right now to defend rules that the Biden administration put in place in court. We are also actually taking offensive strategies where we are representing individuals and communities that are impacted by sources, big industrial polluters that are breaking the law through citizen suit litigation in federal court. We also put out investigative reports and data analysis to make sure that we are providing facts to counter false narratives by different industries. So that's just a little bit about our organization and what we are doing right now to show up in this really unprecedented moment.
Thank you so much, Jen, Phoebe, and Tarah, for those introductions. And thank you for the important work that you're all doing during this unprecedented and difficult time. If anyone has questions for any of our speakers today, please go ahead and add them to the Q&A box. And as I said, I will incorporate as many of them as I can as we go. Let's start with a question for all three of you. And Tarah, I'll start with you. Litigation played a big role in stopping attacks on environmental protections in the first Trump administration. Do you think things will be different this time? And if so, how?
Yeah, thanks. As Jen laid out, I think a lot of things are different this time around so far, but I do think that litigation will play as important or even a more important role this time around. One thing that's very similar to the first Trump administration is that just so many of the actions being taken by this administration are plainly illegal. And we are ready to challenge as many of those as possible in court. I think one thing that's different this time around is, as Jen also mentioned, this administration's attack on its own agencies, on government itself. We're dealing now with agencies and a Department of Justice that have significantly been destaffed. And so they may actually be less equipped to do the work of, rolling back regulations. Regulatory work is very time and labor intensive. And if you want to have a rollback stand up in court, it needs to be done competently and carefully. So that could actually play in our favor as we see this administration rushing to reverse as many protections as possible as quickly as possible. And much like the first administration, so far, Trump's track record in court is terrible. They're losing the vast majority of legal challenges, and we will do our best to make sure that that trend continues. I think something really important that's different this time around also is that a lot of these deregulatory actions are being done with illegal procedural shortcuts. Trump has made it really clear that he was impatient with the pace of destructive actions in the first administration and wants to shortchange the public notice and engagement that is embedded in federal law when agencies do rulemakings or try to roll back rulemakings. And so we're going to need to be bringing challenges to those shortcuts in front of courts, and courts are going to have to reject these illegal strategies and see them for what they are if we want to successfully slow what is already a flood of deregulatory actions.
Yeah, thank you, Tarah. Phoebe, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'd echo a lot of what Tarah you said. I think litigation has to play a role. I mean, we don't have a choice. I agree with maybe on the bright side, the liabilities that the administration is bringing has brought to itself. When I see I think just the lack of interest, lack of concern for following basic laws, I think that creates a different environment, and just also just in the public. And I don't want to kind of paint the courts as reflecting necessarily the public, but I do think to some extent that we have seen and we are going to see, attack others, fine, but attack us. We're going to start taking that personally. So I do hope that at least that could be a silver lining to the abuses.
Yeah, thank you. And Jen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I would just echo a lot of what Phoebe and Tarah have said, and just maybe underscore the fact that Trump lost a lot in the last administration. He is losing a lot already in these first few months. And because he is moving so quickly, what is coming out from this administration um, is so far from what the law requires. Just one example I would give is the exemptions that the president issued under the Clean Air Act for coal plants, from compliance with air toxics rules to reduce mercury. Um, Instead of the kind of detailed fact finding and decision making that is required to grant that kind of exemption for a facility, there was a rushed executive order that could have been written in crayon, that did none of the fact finding, did none of the analysis that is required under the law. So in many cases, I think he may lose even more, in the courts, because of that, because of this approach. It on the other side of it is that there is almost a sort of catch me if you can energy to what is happening, where advocates may win in court, and then the next day there's a slightly different tack or approach that now we have to follow that and chase that down as well. And so I think that is what is different, that kind of sustained defense that needs to happen, which is very resource and time intensive and can be hard to keep up with. But I do think that, um, you know, I do think that, the Trump administration will continue to lose in the courts.
Yeah, thank you. And this question is related. We'll start with you again, Tarah. So it sounds like the courts are one of our best defenses right now, but they're hardly friendly to progressive advocates. Can we still win in the courts?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to follow on, what Jen was saying, yes, I think we can and we will. Trump is losing the vast majority of lawsuits so far. And I don't think that we're going to see a different trend when it comes to environmental litigation. Of course, we'll have to adapt our strategies to the tactics and approaches of this administration and follow what the courts are doing. We also will have to kind of consider limitations under some of our environmental laws imposed by the Supreme Court in some recent destructive cases. But yes, I think we can absolutely still win in the courts. And, the courts are really different than they were 8 years ago. I mean, Trump appointed hundreds of federal judges with lifetime appointments, but so did Biden. And so we can't assume that things will play out exactly the way they did the first time around. But I think even more significantly, even with Trump-appointed judges, we're seeing a lot of concerns across the judiciary about how Trump is waging war, not just on the courts, but on individual judges, calling for impeachment of judges, refusing to follow court orders, undermining judicial authority, and the separation of powers. So I think that is going to lead to more skepticism by judges, honestly, of all political backgrounds, or I shouldn't say political backgrounds, but of all backgrounds, when considering a challenge to this administration's actions. Not to get too wonky, but the government has long enjoyed something called the presumption of regularity. Basically, courts assume that the government is engaging in good faith, that it is engaging with candor and transparency and honesty. And that presumption has gone out the window just in the first few months of this administration. And so I think judges are going to be taking a much closer look at some of the things this administration is saying when they come into court and their actions. I also think something important to note is that last year the Supreme Court overturned a really important precedent called Chevron and basically eliminated a lot of deference that agencies typically get when they're interpreting statutes that are unclear. Now, eliminating Chevron deference, I think, is really an attack on science and expertise. But in the short term, I think that means that we're going to have a much more level playing field when we're challenging agency actions as unreasonable or not well supported by the law or the facts. So that could make it even more likely that we're able to win in court.
Thank you. Jen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think the only thing I would add is that, for historically, and I think right now is no different with respect to enforcement. where you have a citizen suit litigation or enforcement, I think it doesn't, most judges don't have patience for defendants who are breaking the rules, who are breaking the law. And so I do think that that is also another area where I think that we will continue to see judges make good decisions. They are and work to preserve the rule of law and hold polluters accountable.
Yeah, thank you. Phoebe, would you like to add?
I don't have much to add on that point. For our from our kind of perspective, the federal courts in a lot of ways where we have not been that friendly for quite some time. And that all plays into some of our decisions about, for us, whether to go to state court, whether to go to federal court, recognizing, of course, that that's state court is not a very attractive option in a lot of places in the country.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you've all three touched on lots of different things in that response that I'll follow up with, but let me start with a question that Matthew sent in, asking if this current state of the courts selects a very selective strategy. Does anyone want to take that question?
Well, I think Phoebe just spoke to it a little bit. I mean, we always have to be really careful where we file lawsuits if we have a choice. In some litigation, we can kind of choose what court we want to be in. Much of the time, we can't. And then we have to decide if we have to file in this court on this issue, maybe the risk outweighs the potential benefit. So we're always kind of making those calculations. We'll also have to be really thoughtful, as always, about what arguments we want to make. Strategically, do we want to go after this administration for its procedural shortcuts and shenanigans, or just the heart of the rollback it's trying to enact? So those calculations are always important to our work. I think they will be even more so going forward.
Thank you. Jen, we mentioned a little bit that there have been attacks on science itself. What impact do the Trump administration's attacks on science have on environmental advocacy efforts?
Yeah, I really think that, this is going to have significant impacts on environmental health protections and public health protections that may be felt for a long time. Scientific integrity is absolutely critical in all aspects of environmental decision making. I mean, we cannot make decisions about compliance, with our statutes or putting in place these technology-based rules or risk-based rules without science and scientific integrity. So it really is part of the foundation of the way of implementation of our environmental laws. And what we are seeing is attacks at all levels on science, where we are seeing budgets cut. I think the proposal for the EPA science budget is to cut it by 52%. They're eliminating 1,000 science positions. They're cutting programs that provide assistance in science to states. So it's not just the federal government that is going to be at a loss in terms of scientific capacity, but oftentimes EPA is either providing funding for state environmental agencies, or they're actually providing that direct science and technical expertise to the states. And that is going to have an impact on states, even that are trying to move forward with progressive policies. We have seen science advisory boards dismantled, funding cut for important, public health and environmental research. We are seeing science silenced in many ways. I think most recently, there was a researcher at the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic that stepped down, who was doing peer-reviewed science on documenting the impacts of the petrochemical industry on communities of color and low-income communities. That was effectively gagged, and because of her science. So I think we need to be very aware of all of these attacks on science and show up where we can in court to fight back against efforts to undermine science. Part of the work that we do with Food and Water Watch when we are defending rules is that we are looking at the science and decision making of the agency, and we are making sure that that is sound. So we're going to continue to do that in the context of these individual cases. So it is something that is absolutely critical for us to pay attention to.
Yeah, thank you. Phoebe, can you talk about what you're doing to push back against the administration's attacks on environmental justice and DEI initiatives?
Sure. I mentioned earlier that one of the things that we're doing is staying the course and continuing doing our best to be a leader in environmental justice and race equity. Specifically, we were awarded our first actually federal grant ever late last year, and that grant was suspended, part of the suspensions on environmental justice grants from EPA, and we decided to move forward with litigation against the administration, along with other organizations and public entities, and feel that it is important that we often ask some of the most vulnerable members of the communities we work with to walk into court against more powerful actors, that it was our opportunity and our chance to walk into court with arguably more powerful actors. Though listening to my co-panelists, I'm now feel maybe they're not quite as powerful as they would like to be and seem to be. We are also making sure that there's a lot of information kind of out in the public about what environmental justice is and what it isn't. I think that the administration and others have done a good job of maligning environmental justice and DEI. And so we do a lot to say it's safe drinking water for people. It's safe air. It's what everybody wants in their homes, in their communities, in their neighborhoods. It's not, there's not a boogeyman here. And then finally, I think we're continuing to do the very best that we can. It's our bread and butter, is elevate the voices of the people at the front lines of environmental fights, the community members at the front lines, and doing so, as I mentioned before, in a way that kind of respects and elevates those voices and those experiences and those areas of expertise, without putting people in more danger and more risk than they're already facing day to day.
Thank you. We've been talking a lot about kind of broad strategies and giving a few examples, but I have a request here. And Tarah, I'll start with you, but could you give some specific examples of court wins and the approach you took to get there? And maybe talking about the monitoring work?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So Food and Water Watch has several lawsuits actually aimed at trying to hold factory farms accountable under the federal Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act requires polluters to have permits that reduce their discharges of dangerous pollution. And the way we know if a facility is complying with that is because it requires them to monitor what they're dumping in our waterways, and that information is public. And so if a polluter is violating their permit and EPA and the state don't do anything about it, citizens can take them to court. When it comes to factory farms, EPA has handled the situation very differently. Significantly has not required these operations to monitor their pollution. It's kind of taken the approach that they're not discharging any pollution, so there's nothing to monitor. And we know that that's completely contrary to federal law. And so we filed a lawsuit in 2019 against EPA for a permit that it had issued in Idaho for factory farms, and raised that monitoring issue actually in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So we were successful in that case. The court agreed with us that you can't just exempt an industry from pollution monitoring that is really at the cornerstone of that statutes. permit program. And we've now taken that federal precedent and we're using it at the state level across the country, challenging factory farm permits issued by state agencies in Colorado, in Montana, likely other states soon. And we've had some early successes now that we have that federal, precedent and EPA's revised permit that we can use as a template for our advocacy going forward. So that's just one example of not just one successful lawsuit, but really a broader strategy to get that win kind of implemented on the ground.
Yeah, thank you. And Jen, at the top of the hour, you were talking about celebrating a win today. Can you tell us a little bit more about that specific win and your approach there?
Sure, I'd be happy to share that. EIP and Food and Water Watch, we have been working for many, many years to really fix one of the most broken programs at EPA that has spanned, Democratic and Republican administrations. And that program is charged with setting technology-based standards for water pollution discharges from big industrial sources of pollution. And they have consistently failed to update, as the Clean Water Act requires, these technology-based standards to keep pace with modern technology. Under the Clean Water Act, the goal is to eliminate all discharges, and there's a framework in place that requires EPA to set and update these standards regularly, so we're keeping pace, right? And so the goal is to ultimately reduce pollution, eliminate pollution as technology improves. Well, EPA has not kept up with that mandatory duty under the Clean Water Act, and for many industrial facilities, they haven't been updated since the 1980s. So think about the kind of technology that we had in the 1980s, like, cell phones, mobile phones that still plugged into the car that were bigger than your head, these old Apple computers. We've dramatically improved how we can eliminate pollution and wastewater. And so EIP, on behalf of Food and Water Watch and many other organizations, took EPA to court for their failure to update these standards for the petrochemical industry. And we just learned this afternoon that the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit agreed that EPA was arbitrary. It didn't consider facts and evidence in the record to show that these standards needed to be updated to reflect modern technology. And really, the importance of that decision, it is important for the petrochemical industry, but it is also important for every single other industry, like steel manufacturers, other big sources of pollution. So it is really exciting win. And I think it's just, we know that when we put together strong cases and we have the facts and the technical expertise on our side, and we have the really important stories of the impact that this failure has on the ground for people, we can win in the courts.
Yeah, thank you. Tarah, is there anything you'd like to add about how, I guess, is the Trump EPA enforcing the laws on the books and how that relates to your work?
Yeah, so what we've seen so far, and I won't limit my answer to EPA because we're seeing this kind of across the government, but Trump has directed agencies government-wide to use non-enforcement basically as a tool of deregulation. Basically telling agencies to act like the rollbacks they want to accomplish have already happened. Specifically, there was an executive order directing agencies to avoid taking criminal enforcement actions whenever possible, and telling EPA not to take enforcement actions that would shut down any stage of energy production absent an imminent threat to public health. So this was really a pretty blatant giveaway to the fossil fuel industry, and an invitation to break the law with fewer consequences. Also relevant to Food and Water Watch's work, we've seen the Department of Transportation actually propose an internal policy that would effectively punish its own enforcement staff if they don't do everything perfectly, and to make it easier for violators to challenge enforcement actions against them. So this stands to have a huge chilling effect on enforcement activity related to things like violations of pipeline safety, which is something we do a lot of work on.
Thank you. Phoebe, is there anything you'd like to add about the Trump EPA enforcing the laws on the books and how it relates to your work?
No, I would say that we have not seen any enforcement in the past several months. We were cooperating with the past administration's EPA on several matters, and that we are no longer cooperate. I mean, there's no cooperation to be had at this point. So that is a loss for the people that we've been working with.
Yeah. And Jen, you've talked about it a bit, but is there anything else you'd like to add about your experience with the Trump EPA enforcement and what your groups like yours can do to about this failure to enforce?
Yes, one of the things that EIP does is evaluate how EPA is doing with respect to enforcement. And we do that regardless of who is in the White House. And we look at the enforcement metrics, like how many cases did they initiate? What were the civil penalties? How timely was the enforcement response? And we were deeply concerned before January 20th about a significant decline in these enforcement metrics at EPA, given what we saw in the first Trump administration, and that which was a steep decline. And that really is bearing out. Just in the first full 3 months, we took a quick early snapshot of how many cases were opened, how many cases were closed, and those numbers are way down compared to the first full 3 months of the Biden administration and even the first full 3 months of Trump 1. And Tarah mentioned, one of these memos, but I wanted to just underscore the memo from the head of EPA's enforcement division that modified the national enforcement initiatives and effectively requires political approval to move enforcement actions against industrial operations associated with energy production. So even though the language of that order, doesn't seem to prohibit this kind of enforcement, the fact that enforcement staff have now got to ask permission from a political appointee to take action, that will absolutely have a chilling effect on enforcement. And in fact, CNN reported earlier this week that certain regions are being told directly, do not do enforcement against oil and gas industry. So when our environmental laws allow individuals to file citizen lawsuits in federal court to enforce the law when government fails to act. And so this is absolutely one thing that is critical to preserve the rule of law, protect our democracy, and ensure that we are exercising and claiming our rights under these environmental statutes is when EPA is not enforcing the law and there is an enforcement gap, we can step in and file these citizen suits in federal court.
Thank you. Phoebe, we also need to work at the state level, and often that work is focused on pushing more progressive states to do better. How are you navigating the need to hold states accountable while defending them from attack by the Trump administration?
Yeah, thanks for that question. A lot of our advocacy is focused on local agencies and state agencies. We work closely in collaboration with several state agencies, and we also litigate against and have generally have a relationship with state agencies that we don't always get along, but when we do, we get along great, and when we don't, we have to sue you, and things haven't changed that much other than we have received some pressure. The feds are really Really, beating up on the Air Resources Board. Can you be a little bit nicer to them? And, I said, the state has taken a position that they want to be the leader of the resistance and the leader of climate change and the leader of environmental justice. And all we're asking is that actions are fall in line with the rhetoric. It's what we asked 2 years ago, and it's what we're going to ask today. And now more than ever, in California and other progressive states, that the states really need to be the safeguarding on the forefront, for protecting the environment, protecting people. So we're continuing to do what we do, what we need to do through legislation, cooperation, and especially through litigation. We're litigating against, I said earlier, just people are in no less need of clean air and water than they were 2 years ago. So we're currently in litigation against 2 state agencies. We've no longer with a water board, but we were kind of joking, looking at the state, the organizational chart, and deciding who's next. But I think that work continues to be extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, thank you. Jen, there are a lot of concerns about the administration's lack of transparency, which makes it hard to keep track of what the administration actions even are when they're rolling back environmental protections, and it keeps people in the dark about pollution. Can you speak to strategies you have that shed light on the administration's actions?
Yes, that's a great question. And we do a lot of Freedom of Information Act litigation at EIP, which is really a critical tool, I think, for advocates across issue area, particularly right now. So we file a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests, no matter who is in the White House, but we have particularly ramped that up, given the fact that a lot of the information that has traditionally been published online is now offline. And so we are going to continue to use the Freedom of Information Act as an important tool to collect information and then share that out with the public. We have lots of resources available on our website where we publish government data, pollution data in a way that is accessible for folks to understand and evaluate what the impact is. And we're going to continue to do that. We've also added new databases that have records related to illegal violations, enforcement activity. So we can document where EPA is not moving forward, where there are violations identified. And we will continue to publish investigative reports about the kind of pollution impacts that communities are experiencing and what is, what that relationship is with respect to these rollbacks, as well as, the illegal nature of some of the actions that the Trump administration is taking as well with respect to public health and environmental protections.
Thank you. There was a question that we've all alluded to this afternoon, and it is continuing to come up a number of times. It seems to be on everyone's mind. I know it's on mine. People are understandably concerned about the erosion of the rule of law itself and the Trump administration's willingness to ignore court orders. How has this been impacting environmental litigation, and how do you think it will in the future? Let's start with Tarah for this one.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, this is a big question, and we're in kind of uncharted territory here. I certainly think that this erosion of the rule of law could impact our work doing environmental litigation. I don't think we've seen a lot of it yet, except that we're seeing the Trump administration taking shortcuts. And I don't think we've seen, refusal to follow court orders in environmental litigation, although I'll let Jen and Phoebe speak to that if that's not right. So far, this has been mostly in the arenas of, immigration, deportation, and it's really hard at this point to predict how far the administration will go in disrespecting the courts and their authority. But I still think that for now, the courts are one of our most powerful lines of defense. And to go back to something I said at the beginning, I think the people are our other strongest line of defense. And to help keep the courts strong and independent in this time, people need to continue to demand accountability of the administration. People need to be showing up, peacefully protesting, getting out in the streets, and doing things like demanding that their senators, take action to block unqualified judicial nominees and otherwise speak up for a strong independent judiciary. So I think there's a role for everyone in this audience to play in trying to hold the line on the rule of law with regards to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Phoebe, do you have anything you would like to add?
I just really appreciate the role of the people, but what Tarah mentioned, as it does feel like at times we are bystanders in this terror play, and that there is a role, and that will help the court stand up, and hopefully more and more people stand up to the administration.
Thank you. And Jen, anything that you would like to add?
Just echoing what Tarah and Phoebe have said about the importance of building community, of showing up. The only way through this is through it, and we are going to need to demand accountability. We need to exercise our individual rights in all spaces. And just to underscore, the power, of one or two people, it is contagious in terms of standing up and fighting back. And so never doubt that. And I think that we are seeing that right now across the country, which is really inspiring. And it gives me more energy when we're continuing to file paper after paper to see communities across the country protest peacefully and demand accountability.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I think you may have just answered my final question, which is how can we support the work that's happening in the courts? And that sounds like showing up is the biggest thing. But is there anything else that you'd like to add as we're closing out in terms of what we can do and how people can learn more about the work that is happening in the courts? All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, to your great questions. Thank you so much to Jen Duggan, Phoebe Seaton, and Tarah Heinzen for joining us this afternoon. Before you all go, I have a couple of closing announcements here. We talked a lot today about the important legal work we're doing. We know it is a tough fight ahead, but like I said before, Food and Water Watch has never shied away from a tough fight. We will continue to fight against harms to our food, water, and climate, and we will continue to fight against the corporate greed and illegal regulatory rollbacks coming from this administration. If you would like to increase the impact we can have, please consider making a donation or becoming a Food and Water Watch member today. Remember, we don't take any corporate funding, and we are not beholden to any special interests other than the health of our communities and our planet. Our support comes from people like you, and a gift today will help us continue to do this important work. Thank you so much for your generosity. I hope you'll join us for our next Livable Future Live on August 20th to learn about the work we're doing to stop Big Pharma from skirting legal justice for the health and environmental harms they have been accused of. The sign-up link is in the chat, and I hope to see you there. Thank you all again for joining us today. Please watch your email inboxes. I'll be sending out a recording of today's session later this week. Take care and see you next time.